By the time Mara Nez reached the last ranch on the plain, she had already learned what every closed door sounds like. It sounded like a latch sliding shut before she could speak, like a curtain twitching, then going still, like people deciding she and the baby in her arms were a burden before they were human. The land ahead of her was all wind and copper light. The New Mexico dusk stretched flat and merciless. The land behind her was worse. It was mile after mile of refusal. Mara kept one hand around the bundle pressed to her chest. Her daughter, Willow, slept in jolts, tiny breaths brushing the inside of Mara's shawl. That faint warmth was the only thing keeping Mara upright, because if this last house turned her away too, there was nowhere left to walk to. Only dark, only cold, only the long, empty plain swallowing two more names without a sound. On the porch of the ranch house, Elias Mercer saw her before she reached the gate. He had spent 2 years pretending grief was something a man could organize. He had expanded his herd, bought more land, kept his books exact, kept his house silent. None of it had brought his wife back, and none of it had filled the rooms she left behind. So when he looked out and saw a woman stumbling through the dust with a child tied to her body, something in him tightened. Not only pity, recognition. Still, caution came first. She was Danae, alone, exhausted, and this land was full of men who treated kindness like weakness and difference like threat. He could already hear Silas Creed in his head, the foreman who believed mercy was the quickest way to lose authority. "Feed one stray," Silas always said, "and trouble learns your address." Mara stopped at the bottom step of the porch. For a second she said nothing, as if speech itself had become too expensive to waste. Then she lifted her chin. "We need shelter." No performance, no dramatic plea, just the stripped-down truth of someone who had no breath left for anything except honesty. Elias opened the door and stepped outside. The evening wind moved dust across his boots. He looked at her face first, sunburned, drawn tight with fatigue, proud even now. Then at the child. The baby's cheek rested against worn cloth, too still, too light. "You've come far," Elias said. It was a useless sentence, and he knew it the moment it left his mouth. Mara gave one small nod. Her lips were split from thirst. Elias hesitated, then pointed toward the water trough by the corral. "There's water there," he said, "and the old tack shed stays dry enough if the night holds." Dry enough. Even to his own ears it sounded like a coward's compromise, but Mara only said, "Thank you." Not because it was enough, because it was more than the last place had given. Before Elias could speak again, Silas Creed came out from the barn, wiping axle grease off his palms with a rag. "You letting her stay?" he asked, "because that won't stay quiet for long." Elias did not answer. Silas stepped closer, voice lower now, made uglier by certainty. "Men in town already say you've gone soft since Clara died. Open the place to an Indian widow, and they'll say worse." Mara heard every word. She bent over the trough anyway, cupping water into her palm, letting a few drops touch the baby's lips before she drank herself. That was the moment Elias should have told Silas to shut his mouth. He didn't. And later, that silence would shame him more than anything Silas had said. He gave Mara a blanket that night, just one, set it down by the tack shed door without comment, as if distance made the gesture cleaner. She accepted it with a quiet, "I see your kindness." Then darkness took the ranch. Wind moved through the slats. Horses shifted in their stalls. And somewhere near midnight, a song rose through the yard. Low, steady, in a language Elias did not know. Mara was singing to the child. He sat beside his window and listened without meaning to. The melody was thin as smoke, but it carried. It crossed the yard, crossed the silence in his house, crossed the part of him he had boarded shut after Clara died. For the first time in months, grief did not feel empty. It felt awake. Morning came pale and cold. Mara was up before the hands. She fetched water, swept out the shed, repaired a split leather strap left near the fence with thread pulled from the hem of her own skirt. When one of the skittish geldings started stamping, she spoke to it under her breath until it calmed. She never asked for more. That unsettled Elias almost as much as her suffering had. People who begged let him stay in the role of giver. Mara did not. She accepted what was offered, gave back what she could, and made his half-mercy look exactly as small as it was. So Elias began leaving food where she would find it. Cornbread wrapped in cloth, a heel of cheese, warm milk for the baby, always without announcement. She answered in her own way. A mended shirt left folded on a rail, fresh ash cleared from the cook stove before dawn, a broken latch bound temporarily with rawhide before anyone else noticed. Their exchange happened in the spaces between words, but the ranch saw it, and the ranch talked. Silas saw every small sign and treated each one like evidence of weakness. The hands started watching Mara as though patience itself were a kind of offense. Even the cook, who said nothing aloud, began setting plates down harder when Mara passed. Elias felt the pressure building, not because he agreed with them, because reputation had become the scaffolding of his life, and he had leaned on it for so long he no longer knew what would remain if he kicked it away. Then one afternoon, the sky changed. Light went green-gray over the plain. Wind dropped so suddenly the whole ranch seemed to hold its breath. Then, thunder split the horizon. The storm hit hard and fast. Rain drove sideways. Barn doors slammed. Loose metal screamed against wood. Elias was halfway to shuttering the main house when he looked toward the tack shed. The roof was holding on one side, peeling back on the other. He saw Mara inside, crouched in the corner, her body curved over Willow, blanket soaked through, mud pushing under the threshold, rain finding them anyway. For one brutal second, he understood the truth. He had told himself he had not turned her away, but this was only refusal, with better manners. Elias ran through the rain. By the time he reached the shed, Mara was on her knees, one arm over the baby's head, the other braced against the buckling door. She looked up at him, water streaking down her face. No accusation, no plea, only that same terrible dignity, as if she had expected the world to fail her again, and had already decided she would survive it if she could. Elias put out his hand. "Come inside." He said it like a man confessing, not commanding. Mara stared at him for a beat that felt longer than the storm. Then she placed her cold fingers in his palm. He led her across the yard and into the house. Firelight washed over them. The rooms that had seemed dead for 2 years suddenly felt unfinished, as if they had been waiting for something he had not known how to name. Willow began to cry, a thin, exhausted sound. Without thinking, Elias reached for the child. Mara hesitated, then let him take her. The baby weighed almost nothing. That was what broke him. Not the tears he had kept down at Clara's funeral, not the empty cradle stored in the spare room. This. A child light enough to disappear, a life small enough for the world to misplace. He held Willow closer until her crying softened against his chest. When he looked back at Mara, she was standing by the hearth, soaked shawl hanging from one shoulder, eyes sharp with caution and disbelief. She was not inside because she had won. She was inside because he had finally stopped lying to himself. "You can stay," Elias said. The words entered the room quietly, but nothing in the room stayed the same after that. Mara did not answer at once. Her face changed in the smallest way. Not relief exactly. Relief would have assumed safety. This was heavier than that. It was the look of someone setting down a burden only one hand-width at a time because she still did not trust the ground. Outside, thunder rolled farther off. Inside, the fire steadied. Elias handed Willow back to her, then pulled a chair closer to the hearth. Not near enough to claim intimacy, not far enough to preserve distance. A beginning, then. Awkward. Unnamed. Real. Storm passed, but the harder weather had not. Silas would speak. Town would speak. The world beyond those walls would have plenty to say about a rancher, a Danae mother, and a baby brought in from the dark. But for one night, judgment did not get the final word. Warmth did. Bread did. A crying child gone quiet did. A man who had lived too long with absence did. A woman who had been refused by every door before this one did. And when dawn finally touched the windows, the house no longer felt like a place built from timber, nails, and inheritance. It felt like what a home becomes the moment one soul decides another will not be abandoned. Somewhere out on the wet prairie, the wind kept moving. But inside that ranch house, 3 shadows leaned into the same fire. And the question Mara had carried across all those miles, "Where do we go now?" no longer sounded like despair. It sounded like the first line of a future.